join me today at the wheel of something very, very unusual indeed. I am driving a 1982 Towns Hustler 4 Wood. Hello, welcome to Furious Driving. Now I sign off pretty much every Goes for a Drive video with "and see you again next time in something totally different or completely different or just different." Well, today I have got something which I guarantee is very different. You may have heard of the Towns Hustler, but I would almost lay money on the fact you've never seen one in the flesh. There aren't that many of them around. Now here in Britain we've had a long and illustrious history of Freds in sheds, guys on their own having a thought that they could take a crack at building a car better than the big boys can, and so some Fred in a shed knocks out something based on a Triumph or a Mini usually. And the thing is, generally they are either experienced in engineering but not much of a design background, a designer who's got a great idea for a visual interpretation but not much of an engineering background, and so these things tend to fall a little bit flat, should I say. There are lots of them and they vary in quality quite wildly. Some of them are okay, like the Lenham sports cars based on the MGs were actually really quite good, but a lot of them, the design just looks very unresolved. Then you get the Towns one. William Towns, as I'm sure you are aware, designed the Aston Martin Lagonda. He was a proper car designer. He started at Roots in the early 50s working for Hillman. He moved to Rover in the early 60s and stayed with BL for a long time. He was involved in the Triumph Puma program, which was eventually replaced by the SD1. He had a long and successful career as an actual car designer for the big major car manufacturers. So when he designed something a bit different, it was worth taking note. Now the Hustler was revealed to the world in July 1978 as a modular design concept, an idea which actually Volkswagen Group in the present day are using with their MQA, MQB platforms, building bigger and smaller cars around the same chassis. The idea with this was you'd have a central monocoque tub and different bodies you could park on top, 4-wheel and 6-wheel versions, all evolved later on. But it was also intended to demonstrate low volume production techniques and technologies. Now the prototype, as continued into production, had Mini front and rear subframes, but that had a steel monocoque tub, it had steel lower panels and a fiberglass shell across the top, a fiberglass clamshell on the bonnet. Now you only have to look at the Lagonda to see this, but William Towns' design trademark, if you like, was wedginess. Lots of angles, triangles, intersecting, just angular. It's almost like from the mid-60s onwards he was trying to get his designs picked up by a Hollywood studio or a TV company to put his stuff onto some sci-fi program. If the Hustler had been around when The Prisoner was made, you can guarantee they'd have driven these, not Mini Mokes. He really did let his imagination run wild with the prototype. It had things like Macho Rancho style extra spot lamps above the windscreen. It had vinyl on the roof. Even this production version appears to have Macho Rancho style roof rails. But the press and public reaction was incredible. People loved this thing. So Towns decided to set up production from home. He had his Interstyl, or Interstyl, it's style without an E on the end, design studio based at his Gloucestershire home, and that's where they started making these kits. And so in 1979, he put these things into production. You could send in your order form, I guess by post in those days, go down to his house in Gloucestershire and collect your kit. It differed slightly from the original production. I don't believe it's a steel monocoque shell anymore. I believe now it's a fiberglass lower shell with a metal hoop frame for the lower half and a metal hoop frame for the upper half, which then sandwiched together. It's a form of monocoque in a way, semi-monocoque. Now though he supplied the floor pan, the framework, on the original ones that came out, the fiberglass bodywork and panels, the glass, and a lot of other things like that, you had to supply your own mechanical parts. So you'd have to go and source your own engine and subframes. You could either go and buy them direct from your local Mini dealer, or go and scour the junkyards and find the car of your choice. Now I'm sure you have noticed this is not made of fiberglass, this is marine ply, because in 1980 he decided to go one step further in the kit process and allow people to build their own bodywork. So he would sell you the frame and the glass and the other parts you can't replicate, and then send you some blueprints. So you could go down to your local chandlers and choose whatever grade of marine ply and ash that you wanted to, and as long as you were handy with a saw and a hammer, you could build your own car like a carpenter. Wow. And this was apparently a very cheap option. In the early 80s, the kit for the wooden four-wheeler cost £575. Now of course, as it was a kit car, it's kind of up to you what you did with it really, so no two are really like. Apparently they sold 500 kits all told, but it's a mystery as to how many were actually completed, because building a car is surprisingly difficult, even when all the bits are in front of you, especially if it's made of wood and you've got to cut all the bits exactly right. I can imagine this being very, very frustrating. So I believe they supplied these Weller wheels as part of the kit. I'm not 100% sure on that, but I think the Weller wheels were part of the deal. However, the headlights and indicators and things were all entirely up to you. I haven't worked out what these indicators are from, but these are Hillman Hunter headlights. So there are 4 of them, of course, so you'd have to raid 2 Hillman Hunters from the breaker's yard, or possibly go down to your local Roots main dealer, because this car was built in 1982 and there were still Roots parts on the shelf. Pop quiz for any hubnut fans out there. What do you think this wiper is from? And check out the, I'm not going to turn the wipers on today because this car is pristine. Check out the Triangle of Doom, the Arc of Panic, if you like, on this thing. This is a Citroen wiper, apparently. I'm not sure which model it's from, but it is a Citroen. Maybe if you're a Citroen fan, you can tell me. I recognise these mirrors, but I haven't actually worked out what they're from yet. So if anyone knows, again, stick it in the comments below. It looked like Land Rover, but smaller. And then we have the tail lights. These ones are from a Triumph Dolomite, but you could have picked anything that fitted as into this gap here or onto this lower panel here, so it was entirely up to you. And little individual Land Rover ones would have fitted quite well into this alcove, or something bigger, I don't know what would have fitted. But fitting them into this nice little gap here does work design-wise quite well. But again, it's entirely up to you what you fitted and where you put it. Now, keeping with the marine theme, to get into the bonnet, we've got these little lift-up hoops, fasteners, turn them here and here, and up it comes. Very nautical. Now this particular car has got a 998cc engine taken from a minivan, which gave up its gubbins to give life to this, so we've got minivan subframes front and rear. But this also, apart from being a van engine, has got a Kenlo fan, electronic ignition, and Mini Cooper S front discs and the servo, so it's got some fairly decent braking potential underneath it. And we've got a VIN plate over here, a brass plaque screwed to the inner wing. And the guy who built this particular car was a naval and electrical engineer, so he did actually really quite a tidy job of putting all the wiring and items around in a logical, sensible place. In fact, if you looked under a boat bonnet, it's not that dissimilar to the way all the wiring is grouped and routed and everything is bolted around to the bulkheads. Now, normally, when you put down a bonnet with one of these mini type or Austin type struts, it's pretty easy. You lift the bonnet slightly, push the tag to release it, and down it goes. Now, unfortunately, well, just there are 2 struts here, left and right, because I guess a wooden bonnet is a bit heavier, I suppose. So what you have to do to this particular technique is lift the bonnet on your head, then you can pull the tags and lower the bonnet. Obvious, really. Looking under the car, you can see the large, I believe it is fiberglass rather than steel, tub, the monocoque tub that the car is built around. If you're going to pass your nose under the back of the vehicle, you can see the mini subframes just about, and suspension. And here at the front, again you can see many more mini components. There's the bottom of the engine, gearbox, suspension, and the Cooper S brakes. Now, one area which is never usually properly resolved on kit cars is the doors and windows, because the fixtures and fittings never quite work as planned, and so the doors are never a very good flush fit. The windows don't wind up and down very easily or properly or at all in some cases. Now Towns, though, because he's a proper designer, he had a proper think, and he came up with a solution, a very kind of futuristic, space-agey, buggy-ish solution. This window is also a door. He even had a name for it. He called it the Winddoor, because it is, it's a window and a door. And you slide back on what looks suspiciously like a conservatory door fitting, and you're in. There is security because you can lock this little latch here. I'm not sure how strong it would actually be, because that's just going through glass, which I assume is tempered or safety glass of some kind. I'm rather hoping it is. And then you can climb into the car over the very wide step and quite high sill. Doing some swimming trunks might be painful. Now, there is a handle up here which helps getting in and out. It's one on the passenger side as well. And the sill you step over is absolutely enormous. It's got to be about sort of 30 centimetres wide, which means your feet are pushed right over towards the central tunnel of the car. And the actual footwell itself is quite narrow, surprisingly narrow in fact. Considering how wide the car is, you don't get much space for where your feet live. Now I will say, The chap who put this car together must have been quite handy as a joiner or a carpenter, because the fit and finish in here is really very good indeed. I'll pull this wind door across just to keep the noise of the traffic out. So the headroom is just vast. This goes up a really long way. Now when you look at the car from outside, the proportions are a little odd. It's quite a low belt line and a very, very high glass line. This glass area comes in down to sort of knee level and extends well beyond here. This is ideal for hat wearers amongst us. And the glass area is just enormous. It's, as you can see, it's all purely flat glass, and it's such a product of its time. It's kind of brown tint as well, which is very much what you'd find in your posh sideboards and glass dinner plates in the late 70s, early 80s. It was a colour of the time. William Town's prototype was very utilitarian. It had plastic moulded seats like you find in a school refectory or a canteen, and instead of a glove box it had like a satchel or a handbag kind of thing hanging from a hook on the dash to give you a little bit of storage. But the production cars were obviously much nicer, certainly both in terms of how the dashboard was presented and also in how you upholstered it yourself. This particular car has got a nice deep kind of a beigey carpet which matches the wood very nicely, and these seats are about as far as you can get from a plastic moulded canteen chair. These are from a Daimler Sovereign and extremely comfortable leather indeed. I would give you a run through of what's on the door, but there's nothing on the door because there is just a wind door with this little catch up here. So that's that, and a little wire hook by the entrance just to hook into, give you some security. The dashboard, like the exterior, is another mix match of odds and sods from all over the place. One that got me really sort of stumped for a long time was this panel of switches to the right of the steering wheel. This gives you front and rear fog lights, lights on and off, hazard warning lights, wipers and washers, blowers, rear screen heater, all those kind of basic controls. I thought they were French. I was guessing Citroën or Peugeot, but couldn't quite place it. These are actually, I'll give you 10 seconds to answer, Fiat Strada. The major controls are all Mini. The pedals are pedal box from the Mini, obviously. The steering column is Mini, so you've got the light switch down on the right hand side, and you've got your indicators and wipers up here on the stalks, and the dials are straight from the Mini as well. This shows this car has done 8,400 miles since it was built in 1982, so it didn't get a lot of use, which I guess is why it's in such amazing condition after all this time. This is a Mini steering wheel, but it's a wooden Picket Momo steering wheel, so about as fancy as you can get, and it's a wooden steering wheel too, so it really does fit perfectly. The gear knob down to the left, obviously made of wood. I believe the car builder actually turned this himself on a lathe. I may be wrong in that. Now, because these are Mini instruments, they're fairly basic. We've got a speedo which reads up to 90 miles an hour. I won't be going anywhere near that today. A water temperature gauge which is tiny, a fuel gauge which is also tiny, and a rev counter redlining at 6,000 RPM, terminating at 8,000 RPM. I don't think we'll be trying that today either. In the centre though, this is where it all gets very, very space age and space 1999, the Prisoner-esque once again. At the top, in this little wooden pod, which looks fantastic because it's plywood, it's different colours of timber all sandwiched together, so when you sand and polish the ends you get this lovely stripe pattern going through it. But this houses a row of warning lights, and it's just one perspex strip, long and thin, with little coloured cutouts behind that for the light bulbs to shine through, indicators left and right, oil, ignition, fog lights, rear main beam, side light warning. I guess that's the choke warning, that little kind of star pattern there, but it looks very kind of futuristic and very modern, and the kind of thing that regular kit cars just don't get that level of attention to detail. In this panel below that we have got a CompuCruise, a very early trip computer kind of thing. I don't think it works anymore, but it is absolutely fantastic. It's the kind of thing, a grown-up version of a Raleigh Vector bike, giving you MPG and I don't know, trip stuff. Well, as I say, it doesn't work, I can't do it, but I love it nonetheless. Beneath that we've got the original radio that was fitted to the car, a sharp radio cassette, and because, oh I love this, because it's this particular model, it's one where the cassette goes in sideways with the exposed tape in first. I guess that means it's a shallower bodied unit. I haven't taken it out so I can't be sure. There's not much else below this. We've got three little switches in this lower panel. We've got a master switch for the power here. Not a bad idea in a wooden car. We've got a choke because it's an old Mini underneath, so we've got a mechanical manual choke, a 12-volt lighter socket, and then the heater from the Mini. But instead of being the plastic lump hanging beneath the dashboard like it would be on a Mini, it's all nicely enclosed and built into this wooden sort of fascia panel around the centre. all looking very nice indeed. Then, obviously no cup holders, but we've got a tiny tea shelf. This is because it's a mini tea shelf for mini cups. The regular Furious mug isn't going to fit on there. That's too small. This looks like it'll fit on top of the speedometer, but the rake of the windscreen means it won't. However, you do have a giant tea shelf left and right, so if you're stopping for a picnic at the beach, because this really is a beach car, isn't it? You can place your picnic, your cup of tea, your sandwiches, your Battenberg cake, which I was reminded of last night. Battenberg cake. Down here on this massive panel. See, this isn't an intrusion into the car. This is a place to put your sandwiches. They were thinking of everything. Now, while this little shelf may fail as a tea shelf in the modern world, one thing it does succeed at is a place to stack your mobile phone. If you're using that for using Apple Maps, Google Maps to navigate to your location, this actually holds it quite nicely and firmly on this little bridge here. It does slide left to right for amusement, but nonetheless, it holds it quite well. Now we've got our mini gearbox. It's 4-speed manual and then reverse up to my side at the driver. Mini handbrake, mini seat belts. And then because it's a car for the open air, fun in the sun, undo these latches above your head and you have a hinged sunroof. So you can't read the lights like you can with an MX-5. You step outside the car, you can flip this over and have a great big, virtually roofless experience with the windows back like a delivery truck, that of like a convertible. It's kind of a massive open Targa type experience. Now let's go and have a look in the back of this thing. It's still interesting over there. This is all angles everywhere, so the back of the car is just all more big squareness, giant square sheet of glass on the back, big square sheets of glass on the side. Open it up, the same kind of catch as you had in the front, and similar struts to the bonnet. And also a little similar wire catch for the latch to work on. This whole square glass back does give it a bit of the look of a slightly truncated hearse, a hearse for Smurfs perhaps, but you do have an absolutely vast load area in here. It's huge. Because it's all very tall and very square, you've got a ton of room. This has a nice carpet across the floor. There were multiple versions of this as well. We'll talk all about that in a little while on the road, but this is the Hustler 4 Wood, which means it's a four-wheeler and it's got a wooden body, but it's also a four-seater. It may not look it at the moment, but come around here and have a look at this. Now, you may have noticed these big leather padded areas on the side of this wooden side intrusion bar. In fact, this big wooden bar here is also part of the rollover hoop, the crash structure of the car. People do keep saying about wouldn't want to be in a crash in this, but look at the wood down the side of this thing. Timber is very strong and quite flexible as well, so combine that with the glass fibre top and the metal hoop frame, this probably isn't as bad as a regular Mini in a crash. I don't think they ever got crash tested, so it's really impossible to say. But anyway, look, here we have this nice big carpeted flat area, so currently a huge load space. If you're a Smurf, you could sleep in this, but we can pull this out. And here we have more beautifully varnished marine ply. You can actually see the top of the rear struts, shock absorbers just here. But then we have some curious little piano hinges and some little finger hoops with beautiful brass corners on them as well. So lift up these nice little flaps here, they fold over, and you have got little bench seats. I've got to give these a go, haven't I? Climbing in, not too hard. Not quite comfy on the little padded seat, nice little padded backrest. It's side facing and there's no seat belts at the moment, but you could, as there are big solid wooden timber frames there, fit the seat belt side on just that way, so you could be strapped in, a bit like an old Series Land Rover really. Foot space is alright, you're sitting a little bit low, but then you've got just enough headroom at this height. This is not uncomfortable at all. There is a spare wheel just down here, leather clad, so keep it nice and clean, matching the front seats. It's just set behind the front passenger seat. With the seats folded out, we've got a long trough here, so if you've got bits and bobs, they can live in that little tray just there. There's also one more lift-up flap, which gives us a small storage locker down the back here. There's a couple of hooks and clips screwed to the side, so I don't know if there was a toolkit in here perhaps at one point. That's no longer here. It also gives us access to the wiring loom should we need to make any alterations to that. very, very civilized indeed, very beachy. If you're the owner of a lovely yacht and you had this parked on board your lovely yacht and rode off your lovely yacht into the local area, this would be fantastic. You'd be the envy of Monaco or whatever other luxury town you arrived in. Or if you had a beach house somewhere and wanted to just roll down from the beach house with their kids in the back down to the sand in your Hustler, oh, that'd be fantastic. This would be such a nice day out. Also worth mentioning, this large rollover hoop, as I mentioned, is big solid timber, so the car does have a fair bit of structural integrity. In the rear area we actually have this kind of round wooden coving, just taking the edges off, making it a little bit more smooth, so if you do clonk your head back into that, it's not going to hurt so badly. And we have a fluorescent strip light. This is pure 1980s joy, this big strip light with the brown ends. It's like every caravan you were ever in the 80s exists just here. You can also see the back of the tail lights housed in these little wooden boxes. Because there's no actual boot area, the exterior of the lights are flush with the bodywork. The interior of the lights, which would normally sit inside the boot behind plastic or card panelling, isn't there. So they've made these really nice little smart wooden boxes. One important safety note with these cars, this glass boot lid is quite hard to see, and if you're between 5'10" and 6 foot tall, it's exactly at eye height, so you need to be a little cautious around that. Now, putting the back down does operate exactly the same way as the bonnet. Because there's a pair of these struts, you have to put one hand either side and lift it with your head and release the catches, whoops, and then you can put it down carefully. Now, I mentioned that of the 500 kits that went out, probably not that many of them were actually completed, and certainly I doubt that many were completed to such a high standard as this one. But this one actually wears a plaque from the guys who built it, a couple called Angie and Don Shepherd. They started in July 1981, they completed it November 1982, so less than a year and a half to go from scratch to a running car. And what's more amazing is that they actually owned it until just a few days ago, basically, when it came here for sale. So this car was part of their lives for 39 years, and they really have looked after it. So I do hope whoever buys it next is going to take equally good care. Right, so climbing in isn't always the most graceful. We'll find the right key now. I lost the key. Okay, I will close this side door because it's going to be quite loud otherwise with that much. It'll be lovely to drive with the open air, but it will be quite loud. Now my seatbelt is bolted to that huge wooden frame behind me. Don't need the choke, we've had the car moved a bit already today. So it is just a regular mini 4-speed box. Wow, it really does drive just like a Mini. Oh, brakes are sharp. Now, I chose to film this car on a quiet industrial estate today, knowing that everyone was going to stop and look at it. And in fact, everyone did stop and look at it. There was virtually no one around, but everyone who was around slowed down, either drove past very slowly, got out to take a photo. So many vans did weird, slow 3-point turns right in the camera line just to get a shot of it. It's taken ages to shoot this. I'm trying to get out of that junction. Everyone is slowing down to look at it. Guy in the Audi, properly eyeballing it. Okay, it's an old minivan, so the indicator switch is on the right-hand side. I'm hoping people are noticing the indicators, not just staring at the car agog. Bit of air through. Hopefully the noise isn't too bad from the wind. My God, this car, it drives just like a very big wooden Mini, which is the best I can say about it. The way it feels through a corner is absolutely Mini-like. The way the wheel turns, the steering wheel is connected, it feels like a Mini. It rattles more than a Mini, I'll give it that. And we're doing about 40 miles an hour along this road here. it's a really weird seating position because you're sitting very upright. Sitting very upright in these big Daimler chairs, which normally would be so low down in the frame of the car that you would be kind of looking up at the world almost, but now I'm perched on top of the world. It's almost SUV-like the way I'm sitting in it. Only 998cc, so not got a massive power. It's a surprisingly steep hill, to be honest. Gear change is typically mini. Slightly mechanical feeling, a little bit of rubbery notchiness to it, exactly as you'd expect in a mini. And I hit some country lanes with a bit less traffic on it. The guy on a kind of a Harley style trike over there, it's the only time he's ever been upstaged. This interior mirror is actually weirdly useless because it's so far above my eye line, I can't really see much in it. I mentioned this car has got the Cooper S brakes on it, and wow, they are as sharp as a knife. You have to be quite delicate on the pedal. And all the pedals, they're really tightly boxed in together. There's not a lot of travel in any of them, which is, again, pretty much a mini thing. This car is currently for sale at Stone Cold Classics at Rootham in Kent. If you're interested, and why wouldn't you be, head on over and check them out. And these came in so many body styles, it's ridiculous. But that was the point of it. It was a modular design. That was the whole raison d'etre of the thing. This is the most basic, if you like, apart from the fact it's made of wood, version. It's a 4-seater, 4-wheel car. But you could have virtually the same car as this as a 6-wheeler, which added a second mini subframe in the back of the car. You could go with less bodywork entirely. There was a pickup version with nothing in the back. There was a Jeep-like version which had virtually no bodywork at all, almost open sides. There's also a model called the Sprint, which was 8 inches shorter, a 2+2 version of the car. There's one called the Hobo, which is like a beach car, like a Fiat Jolly almost, and more like a mini moke actually. And of course, there was the utterly insane one, the Highlander, which was a Jaguar 5.3 litre V12 powered version. Now, William Towns actually died in 1993, along with the Interstyl studio name. Now, manoeuvring this car is insanely easy because you're just surrounded by just walls of glass. So you can really position it perfectly on the road or wherever you're parking it because you can see the corners. And those mirrors down there are slightly strangely positioned because they're really low down. They're great for, I don't know, seeing the road surface, not a lot else. I don't know if they changed the spring rates on this thing compared to the regular minivan or mini that it came from, because I imagine a wooden body, I don't know if that's heavier or lighter. I imagine a lot heavier than a standard metal body, and it's not, it feels quite sprightly up to 30, but then it kind of runs at a puff around 40-ish. It is very much like a beach runaround rather than a long-distance sensible daily car. Actually drive like a weird-shaped mini is the best thing I can say. I really do hope that whoever buys this car enjoys it and treats it well. The people who've sold it, who've owned it its entire life, are basically only selling because they're losing their garage, they're downsizing, and didn't want it to be kept outside in the rain, which is totally understandable. With a wooden car, it's not going to rust, but there are a whole bunch of other problems to contend with. Okay, this corner, which I was putting the MX-5 through recently, quite rapidly, has become a second gear turn in this car. It does rattle and shimmy quite a lot. be a great promotional car if you had a business that was in some way water related. So perhaps a dive school or aquarium type place. This would be ideal. Decal up the windows, it'd be a hilarious piece of promotional material. Now, touch wood, I've never actually damaged a car on a test drive, but this is one that I'm absolutely terrified of doing the slightest mark on, because repairing it is not going to be an easy or normal job. Source this glass if you cracked a window. But I guess on a car of this value, they would go to someone like Pilkington's and have one specially made as a one-off. This really is not a car for a shy retiring type, because everywhere I go, people are staring at me. It's actually quite nice driving with the wind door open. I'm hoping there's not too much wind noise. In fact, there isn't even very much blustering going on. This thing is hilarious. I absolutely love it. This is a car that if I could spare dropping, I think it's about £11,000, if I could spare that on a ridiculous toy, I would so absolutely waste it on a ridiculous toy in the form of this. When I eventually get my yacht, I will have to get one of these. I believe there even was a one-off version of these, which was a Hustler boat car. I don't know if that was William Towns designed or sanctioned, or just someone built one because they could. Because it was made of wood and fiberglass and they thought, what the hell, let's do it. There is quite a headwind today. It's quite a strong windy day, and now we're doing sort of 45 into the wind. There's a bit more wind noise than there was before. It's very much a back road, slow, quiet, enjoy the turns kind of car rather than a fast dual carriageway kind of vehicle. Much happier at those kind of speeds. But I do just feel like I'm driving something out of a science fiction TV show. It's true, the right-hand indicators are so much easier to go around roundabouts and things on. Now, one downside to all this glass, despite the very 1982 brown tint, it is a bit of a greenhouse in here. I'll open this up again a bit. The brakes are sharp, but you can feel the weight of the car against them when you come up to a faster stop like that. It's definitely experience driving this car. It really isn't like anything else. I can honestly say I've never driven anything that feels like this at all. Oh, I'm so grateful to Stone Cold for letting me drive this car today. This has been an adventure. This should have been my 30k subscriber celebration car, but the weather and circumstances didn't quite conspire to make it happen. Well, thank you for joining me today in this utterly bizarre, futuristic from the past, utter piece of madness, which I absolutely adore. This thing is, it's just amazing. If you like this, please hit like, please hit subscribe. Do your old share business on Facebook, because this is a car that deserves to be seen. And I'll see you again next time, driving something different, but it won't be as different as this.